So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 46th monthly talk of the Rail Enthusiast Society. Today's speaker, Atulya Sinha, does not need any introduction. This is the sixth time that he's addressing and the third in the series, Once Upon a Track. In the first two talks of the series, he covered full passengers and not half-ticket passengers, as he's going to do in this talk. In other words, he's going to talk about books today that deal with children. So I will not come between you and Atulya Sinha. So here's to you, Atulya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I'll just share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. Right. Topic. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. So the topic of today's presentation, the title of today's presentation is Once Upon a Track. We have all heard of stories beginning with Once Upon a Time, but because this is about railway fiction, the series is called Once Upon a Track. And as Mr. Jail Singh mentioned, this is the third talk in this series. The other two were about railway fiction written for grown-ups. And this time, we are talking about railway fiction meant for children or half-ticket passengers, as we call them. First of all, I would like to dedicate this talk to my beloved mother, who took me on my earliest train journeys, like all mothers and fathers, who all of us, whether we are professional railwaymen or rail fans, we all started our journey with the railways thanks to our parents. So let us remember them and be grateful to them for this. Now, since this is about fiction, let me share a quote about fiction, which I found very interesting. This is by Neil Gaiman, who's a well-known fiction writer, contemporary writer. He says, "We are using memorable lies. We are taking people who do not exist and things that did not happen to those people in places that aren't, to communicate true things to kids and to each other." Now, look at the contrast between memorable lies and true things. So, fiction is basically lies because it's imaginary. It's about people and places and events which did not happen, but the intent is to convey something true. So, I found this quote very apt when we talk about fiction meant for children. So my concept of railway fiction, which I have already discussed earlier, but for those who missed my earlier talks or who might have forgotten because it's been a year since my last talk, railway fiction is basically a short story which is primarily set in a train or a station, etc. Or it could be a novel, a full-length book with significant scenes set in trains, or in which the railway forms a part of the plot. For example, Around the World in 80 Days. The recurrent theme in railway fiction is meeting strangers, because when you travel on a train or you go to a station, there is a good chance that you will interact with someone who you have never seen before and you may never see again. So it is a chance for strangers to meet and interact. So I find this a very interesting aspect of railway fiction. Now, there are different types of railway fiction, and there are different ways of classifying railway fiction. One could be based on the format. So, it could be a novel, it could be a short story, a play, a poem, it could be a comic, etc. The scope is the written word. Of course, one can go beyond the written word also, but then we are not talking about that. We are talking about whatever is in written form. Then you could classify railway fiction based on the date of publication. I have done that in my earlier talks. In my talk of January 23, which was talk number 29, I talked about what I call the classical period from, say, 1850 to 1950, and then the modern period from 1950 onwards, was the topic of my talk, number 35, which was in August 23. This time, we are doing a different class. We are classifying railway fiction on a different full ticket passengers. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Or it can be for children's or half ticket passengers. And in fact, what is meant for children is also directed at adults, because very often the decision to buy the book may lie with adults. And sometimes when the children are too small to read, the adults read out the books to children. So even if a book is meant for children, it must be attractive to adults also, or it will not sell. There can be other ways of classifying railway fiction. For example, there could be what is sometimes called faction, which is a mix of fact and fiction. The best example being Howrah Junction by our own member, Mr. Sanjay Mukherjee. And you can also have railway themed poetry. And perhaps this will be the topic of a future talk. Now, I'm sharing 3 pictures of a mother and child, and you can guess who the child is. And this is to emphasize basically today's topic. In the first picture, the child is a non-ticket passenger. So, and the child will not understand fiction, or for that matter, non-fiction either. So we are not talking about this stage. In the last picture, both are adults, so both are full ticket passengers, or one is a pass holder in this case. In the second picture, the mother is a full ticket passenger, the child is a half ticket passenger. And this is where we are focusing today, where the adult would guide the child, perhaps read out the book and share the story with the child. So this is the target for today. And also,
yeah, we can see your screen now. I hope your connection will be okay now.
Right.
Please carry on.
Yes, I hope so. My connectivity is weak. I'm in a rural area. Anyway, so to continue, we come to the first author of the day. I'll be talking about 5 authors and their books, which I particularly like. And I'll be telling you about the authors and their books and why I appreciate these books. So the first author of the day is Charles Lutwidge Dodson, better known as Lewis Carroll. He was an author, poet, mathematician, and photographer. He was known for his gentle nature and delicate health. He was the eldest of 11 siblings.
Really?
And as you can imagine, he interacted a lot with his children story. So he was very fond of children, but he never married.
But what are the opportunities?
For whatever, a lot of books for which he still remembered. These are the most well-known of his books. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, written in 1865, and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, written in 1871. In the first, the sketch on the left, this is from the original book of 1865. This is from a later book. You'll see that the concept of what Alice would have looked like has changed over the years. Now, about the plot, 7-year-old Alice. Now, interestingly, when we are talking about books written for half-ticket passengers, you will find that the characters are fall in that age group, fall in the age group of 5 to 12 years. So Alice is 7 years old. She steps through a mirror. May I request everyone to mute themselves?
Railway. It's called
7-year-old Alice steps
some railway
into a mirror.
association.
Which everything is
Atulya,
reversed.
I'll mute everybody and
logic.
you can unmute yourself.
It's about the
Right, sir.
literature.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. So Alice finds herself on a giant chessboard in the role of a white pawn, and she has to reach the eighth row to become a queen. As you know, when you are playing chess, a pawn can reach the last row and the pawn becomes a queen. So finds herself in that role. Suddenly she sees elephants and she is scared and she turns the other way and she enters the third square. Then she runs down a hill and jumps over a small stream and she finds herself in a crowded compartment on a train. Now, this seems like nonsense. There's no connection between the various incidents which I'm telling you about, but that's how the book goes. And so we come to the train scene, which is what I wanted to talk about. She's sitting in a train. The train has stopped at a station, and the guard comes in and he asks for tickets. So this is the quote from the book. "Tickets, please," said the guard, putting his head in at the window. In a moment, everybody was holding out a ticket. They were about the same size as the people and quite seemed to fill the carriage. "Now then, show your ticket, child," the guard went on, looking angrily at Alice. And a great many voices all said together, like the chorus of a song, thought Alice, "Don't keep him waiting, child. Why, his time is worth £1,000 a minute." So Alice is all confused. She's sitting in a train. She doesn't know how she reached there and she doesn't have a ticket. All this time, the guard was looking at her, first through a telescope, then through a microscope, and then through an opera glass. At last he said, "You are traveling the wrong way," and shut up the window and went away. Now, this is a more recent drawing of this incident, and you can see how Alice looks different in this picture compared to the earlier pictures. So I like the story because it is a seemingly simple story, but it has a dreamlike plot. There is a complex symbolism. Chess represents a hostile environment where the individual, that is the pawn, has no control. Remember, chess is a battlefield. So it is not a pleasant environment for anybody who is actually on the board. If you can think of that piece as an individual, it is not a pleasant experience to be there. And the train itself has its own symbolism of rushing towards adulthood. And a pawn becoming a queen is again about growth and becoming an adult without being prepared for it. This book has typical Victorian themes like capitalism, industrialization, and loneliness, which were offshoots of the Industrial Revolution. And you'll find my favorite theory that many strangers meet and interact on this train. Then we come to the second author of the day. Remember this quote, "They were not railway children to begin with." And this will give you a hint about the book which I'm talking about and the author. First, let us talk about the author. Her real name was Edith Bland, but she's better known as E. Nesbit. She was a woman ahead of her times. She co-founded the Fabian Society, and she believed strongly in socialism. She had a very modern, unconventional lifestyle. You can see that she cut her hair very short, which was very unusual in those days. She was a heavy smoker, and her family life was very unorthodox. But that is beyond the scope of today's presentation. She wrote about 60 books for children, but she's remembered for only one of them. And she wrote a few books for adults also. These are basically supernatural stories, and they're quite good. I've read some of them. She inspired many well-known authors, including Enid Blyton, J.K. Rowling, and Ruskin Bond. So we come to the book, which I'm sure many of us would be familiar with. This is the book called The Railway Children. published in 1906, and it has never been out of print since then. This book, the author dedicated to her son, and this is what she wrote on the first page. To my dear son, Paul Bland, behind whose knowledge of railways my ignorance confidently shelters. So the real rail fan was not the author, but her son. And she learned from him, and she was confident that whatever he was telling her is correct. And he was in his teens at that time when this book was written. So you can imagine how much faith she had in the young rail fan who was her son. So about the plot, this book begins with these three children living in London. The father is a senior government officer, and the three children are Roberta, known as Bobby, she's 12, and there's Peter, who's 10, and Phyllis, she's 8. So one day the father goes away with two strangers, and they don't know why he's gone and where he's gone, but they have to leave their house in the city and move to a small country cottage near a railway line. They don't have any money now because their father's salary has stopped, and their mother has to write stories. She is educated and she writes stories to make a living, but they stop going to school. And you can see these covers of different editions of this book, and in all of them you'll see a railway line and a train. So there's a railway line close to their cottage. They start going there, and they find an old gentleman who is frequently traveling on that train. So they start waving to him, and he waves back. Then they go to the station and make friends with the station porter and the station master. And basically they become rail fans, to use a modern term. Then there's a famous scene where the track is blocked and the train is rushing towards that blocked spot. And then they wave red flags and stop the train. The old gentleman, who turns out to be a director of the railway, helps them. And he is an influential person, and he's able to resolve the mystery of their father's disappearance, and the father comes back with the family. So that's the basic plot of the story. Now, what is interesting is these two quotes. This is from the beginning of the book. The children are playing with a toy train, and the engine gets damaged. So they ask the father to repair it if he can. The father asks all three children to help with repairing the engine. So Peter, remember there are two girls and one boy. So Peter says, "Can girls help to mend engines?" Peter asks doubtfully. And the father says, "Of course they can. Girls are just as clever as boys, and don't you forget it. How would you like to be an engine driver, Phil?" This was written in 1906, when women in Europe were not allowed to vote. So this shows the progressive thinking of the author, who was far ahead of her times. The second quote is a purely railway description. The train is passing through a tunnel, and this is what the author says: "With a rush and a roar and a rattle, a long dazzling flash of lighted carriage windows, a smell of smoke, and a blast of hot air, the train hurtled by, clanging and jangling and echoing in the vaulted roof of the tunnel." So I'm talking about books, not about the TV and film versions, but I'll make an exception here to share this small bit of trivia. There was, or rather is, a well-known British actress called Jenny Agutter. She's had a very long association with the TV and movie versions of this book. She played Bobby. Bobby is the elder daughter in BBC adaptation of 1968 and 1970. That's the first picture. Then there was a version made in 2000 by Carlton TV. This time she played the mother. Here she is. And this is the old gentleman, played by Richard Attenborough. And then there was a sequel called The Railway Children Return in 2022. She plays herself. She plays a grown-up version of Bobby. And she is a grandmother in this film. But she's supposed to be the same person who she was in this film. So I found this very interesting about how a single actress has played different roles at different stages in the story. So why I like this book is it captures the flavor of an age, but its charm is timeless. This book is about growing up and rail fanning. It supports feminism and socialism. And there are many instances of strangers meeting and becoming friends thanks to the railway. And that's not all. There is something I'd like to share on a personal note. Then you could call me a railway child. Remember, they were not railway children to begin with. In the author's imagination, a railway child is someone who does not belong to a railway family, but at some stage, this person comes close to railways. That happened to me when I became an apprentice in Jamalpur in the year 1984. Then my life started revolving around railways. And it happened to my wife when we got married. So the second picture, effectively, we were both railway children, though we were not literally children. In this picture, I'm 26 and she's 22. Before you accuse me of child marriage, let me assure you that both of us were over 21 at that time. But I mean railway child as a concept that you are basically, you suddenly find yourself living close to a railway and your life gets heavily influenced and you get involved with the railway. So that's a railway child. And now you could call me an old gentleman. Again, you could dispute this. Maybe I'm not old enough or gentleman enough. But the point is that I like to interact with young rail fans. And this is what the old gentleman did in the story. So this brings us to the third author of the day. Let me share a quote from this author first. Railways and the church have their critics, but both are the best ways of getting a man to his ultimate destination. You can take a train and reach your destination, and eventually the church or whatever religion you follow will enable you to get to your ultimate destination. So I found this a very interesting quote. And as you can guess, the author was a rail fan and he was a professional. He was a clergyman, an English clergyman by profession. So he used to preach in the church, and on weekdays when he was not preaching, he was a rail fan. He used to write about books. He used to write books on railways. He created this famous Thomas the Tank series, Thomas the Tank Engine series books, which later on became a television series. And he was involved with the initial television series also. And he also contributed to preservation of railways. So it is not just about writing. He used to contribute to preservation of railways. And in his later books, he talked about preserved railways. Now, what I found interesting about this author is that there were three generations, at least three generations of rail fans in his family. His father had built a model railway layout in his garden, and Wilbert grew up seeing that. Later on, they moved to a house which was near a railway line. And when he was lying in his bed, he could hear the movement of the trains and the steam engines particularly. So when he got married and became a father, his son Christopher was 2 years old and he was sick. So Wilbert started telling him stories about engines. You can see the father, Wilbert, here, and the son, Christopher, standing behind him. Author Christopher Audrey, born in 1940, still living according to Wikipedia, has extended the Thomas series. The father wrote 26 books. Christopher wrote another dozen or so. And he's also written on serious railway topics. So this is a family with three generations, at least three generations of rail fans. Another interesting bit of trivia is Christopher Audrey was born in 1940. Paul Bland, the author of the previous book we talked about, the son of the author of the previous book, the son of E. Nesbit, died in 1940. And the same year, Christopher Audrey, the son of this author, was born. So this is what Reverend Audrey says about his childhood. Lying in bed at night, I would hear both engines snorting up the grade. Now, this was a steep gradient, so there used to be a banking engine. And imagine in their puffings and pantings, the conversation that they were having with each other. I had no doubt at all that steam engines had personalities. So, right from his own childhood, he started believing that steam engines had personalities, and he thought of them as human. So this is his most famous creation, Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. Now, this is written when the son was, this was a story told later on written in a book form. But this is a story which he used to tell to his son. So he used to say Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. Now, this was all technically correct. And as you can see in the picture, whatever description he's given is correct. Now, this is where the author's imagination would kick in. And he used to say he was a cheeky little engine too. He thought no engine worked as hard as he did. So he started giving personalities to the engines. And the engines would interact with each other as if they were human. So that was the author's imagination. Now, here's one of the stories from one of the earlier books in which Thomas makes his appearance, and I'll just share a bit of that story. Now, here's a description of a breakdown train. When there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach. The engine takes them quickly to help the hurt people and to clear and mend the line. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks. This was written in the 1940s. And it is still a very good and accurate description of a breakdown train. And it is in simple words which a child can understand. So in this story, there is a train derails, and Thomas, the hero of the story, is called out to take the breakdown train to the site. And this is what happens when they reach the breakdown spot. The brake van and the last few trucks were on the rails, but the front ones were piled in a heap. Now, anyone who's worked in the railways will understand what an accurate description this is. James was in a field. James is this engine which has derailed. James was in a field with a cow looking at him, and his driver and firemen were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. This is exactly what happens. If a loco derails, then the crew and whoever is at spot, they will examine it to see its condition. Here, of course, he has humanized it and said feeling him all over, but it is basically examining the derailed loco to understand its condition. And then this is where the actual derailment takes place. They left the broken trucks. Trucks means wagons here. They left the broken trucks and mended the line. Then with 2 cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't. So Thomas helped him back to the shed. This is again very accurate, because if a loco is derailed, then you would not like to run it at all. Or if you run it at a restricted speed, and preferably you put another engine and haul it with that. So this was written perhaps 80 years ago, and still it is so accurate. Now, there's a lot of authentic information on railways in these books. He's talked about watering of steam locomotives. He's talked about overheating of brake blocks, especially if they're wooden brake blocks. Wooden brake blocks were used in those days, and they would get overheated. He's talked about leakage from vacuum train pipes and how to plug it. He's talked about whistle bolts. He's talked about hot axles. He's talked about train parting. He's talked about detonators. And he's talked about phasing of steam engines and closure of lines. And these books were written so long ago, and they were meant for children. But it has got so much accurate railway information, which professional railway people can still understand and appreciate. Now, here is one of the characters from the book. It is the name of this engine is Sir Handel, and it is a narrow gauge saddle tank engine. A saddle tank engine is where you have the tank sitting on top of the boiler like this, like a saddle. Now, when you look at this picture, it might ring a bell in your mind. For a moment, don't look at this face. Look at the rest, and you might remember something. And if you are thinking the way I'm thinking, this is what you are thinking of. The B-class locos of the Darjeeling route are very similar to this. So all these characters in these books were based on actual engines which were running in those days. And the B-class was built in UK in by different manufacturers, by different engine loco builders. And this design was well established there. And you can see this is a picture taken on the Darjeeling turntable. This is my son standing in front of one of the B-class engines in 2007. And this is my wife and I at home. And you can see the front of this saddle tank engine and note the similarity with this. So this is another example of the authenticity of the descriptions in this book. Why I like this series is they are simple stories meant for young children. Steam engines have personality and they interact with each other, and they have the personality of small children, in fact. So that's how, as a rail fan and a clergyman, he made up stories which taught morals to small children. But at the same time, there is perfectly authentic information about railways. If you overlook the fact that engines behave like humans or rather like small children, otherwise the railway information is perfectly accurate, authentic. There's subtle humor. There's a song in the book which says, which goes, "Pop goes the diesel." You might have heard a song which goes, "Pop goes the weasel. He's made it diesel." And there are interactions between man and machine here, because the people in charge, the manager of the railway, he talks directly to the engines. Now, some modern writers, some modern readers may not appreciate the Thomas series because by today's standards, they are not politically correct. So let me share some of the reasons why I think that can happen. Now, one thing is that traditionally steam engines are considered feminine. Drivers used to refer to their steam locomotives as she. But here, all the steam engines are masculine. They have names like Edward, Gordon, James, Thomas, Percy. And the coaches are feminine. Annie and Clarabelle are the names of the coaches pulled by Thomas. And the exception is Daisy, who is a diesel rail car. And Daisy is described as highly sprung, not highly strung, but highly sprung. Another example of the author's humor. Diesel locomotives are generally unpleasant characters because they are basically replacing the steam locos which the author likes. So diesel locomotives are shown as unpleasant characters. The manager of the railway is described as the fat controller. By today's standards, this would be called body shaming. Although there is a thin controller also who appears in later stories. And then there is a fat clergyman and a thin clergyman. And the thin clergyman is the author himself. So I don't think this is a valid criticism. But at first sight, fat controller seems a little odd. And the role of drivers is trivialized because it appears that the locomotives are talking and they are taking instructions and they are interacting with each other. So the role of the drivers and the firemen is trivialized in these books. So these could be some of the criticisms of these books. But at the same time, I think that these books have fulfilled a very important role in the lives of rail fans and small children. We come to the fourth author of the day, and a quote not from this author but from another author, but it is relevant for this. The quote is, "A train has a poor memory, it soon puts all behind it." Now, it's not the train which has a memory, it's the passenger who's traveling on a train. And when you travel on a train, you go a long distance, you start forgetting things about the place which you are leaving. And then you have new experiences, you see new places, you go to another place, you start living there, you adapt to that. So you find yourself adapting and forgetting about what you knew earlier. That recedes into the background, and a train helps you to make that transition. So this is exactly the theme of the book which I'm going to talk about. But first, let me talk about the author. His name is Brian K. Flocka. He is an American, and he is a writer and illustrator of children's books. Like Apple, which does both hardware and software for their products. This man writes the stories and he also makes the drawings to accompany them. And he is fully absorbed in the process of creating his books. He's written on a variety of topics. Some of the covers are here, and you can guess the book which we are going to talk about today. It's called simply Locomotive. This book was published in 2013, and it immediately won 2 awards. One was the Randolph Caldecott Medal for the most distinguished picture book for children. So this was about for the drawings, and the Robert F. Sibbert Honor for non-fiction writing. So it won awards for both writing and illustration. And that's what I find very interesting, that the author did both the text and the drawings, and he won awards for both. So this is a very remarkable book. And here is a page from the book, which will give you an idea of what it's about. This font is quite small, so let me read it out. The iron horse, the great machine, 50 feet and 40 tons, wheels spinning, rods swinging, motion within motion running down the track. She is bright in her paint and her polish, note she. The pride of her company and crew, she pulls her tender and train behind her, etc., etc. And then you have the sound, clang, 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 hiss, spit, huff, huff, huff. You see the font gets bigger as it is supposed to indicate a higher level of sound. Of course, this is not a new concept. Many of us would be familiar with Ashok Kumar in a 1960s Bollywood film where he recites a poem called Rail Gadi. So there again, you recite a poem in such a way that the words of the poem evoke the sound of a train. So it's the same concept here, but it's very well executed. And it is historically correct. In the summer of 1869, this is when the first transcontinental railroad has been built across the American continent. And these pages come alive with the sound, speed, and strength of the mighty locomotives and the thrill of travel from plains to mountain to ocean. Now, this is the family. The father has gone ahead to the west coast, and the family is left behind. And after some time, he sends a telegram to his family to come and join. So they are going west. They are leaving with all their belongings. Here they are at the station, mother and 2 children. And then there's another view of the train. And it's a book with about 50 pages, so I can't share all of that. But I'll show you the last page where you see they have met the father and the whole family is together again. And they are able to reach there because of the train. Because the train is running across the continent, this family is able to reach there. After a long journey of many days and many hardships on the way, they have finally reunited with their father. And again, historically accurate, what you see here is 2 people who look Chinese, which is correct because a lot of people from China had gone to the US when the railroads were being built in the 1860s and 1870s. And their descendants still live in Chinatowns in all the major American cities. So why I like this book is, first let me share a quote about this book from Wall Street Journal. It says, Mr. Flocka writes in a loosely poetic prose that rattles along like a string of rail cars. So if you read this book, it sounds like the movement of a train. And the author is an incredibly devoted rail fan. He spent 4 years in researching and writing this book. And the title is irresistible. It is simply called Locomotives. It has much information on history, geography, and railroads. It is a genre breaker. It has fiction, poetry, non-fiction, history, travelogue, railroad trivia, graphic novelette. It can be described by any and all these terms. It's meant for half tickets for children, but can be enjoyed by full tickets or even senior citizens because it has so much information. And in this story, like the others, the children got many opportunities to interact with passengers and railwaymen during their journey. And just one last bit of trivia. This is the author we are talking about, Brian Flocker. There's another author called Elisha Cuthbert. He wrote a book called Train. And here they are meeting and they have exchanged books. They have presented their books to each other. And personally, I was inclined to buy this book also, Train, but it was much costlier than this book. I bought this book on Amazon, but I thought this was beyond my means. And it makes sense that a whole train costs more than a locomotive alone. So just wanted to share this bit of trivia, which brings me to the fifth and last author of the day. I am running short of time, so I'll try to stay within my time limit. First, a quote from E.M. Foster, whom we know as the author of Passage to India. He's talking about railway termini or railway stations. He says they are our gates to the glorious and unknown. Through them, we pass out into adventure and sunshine. To them, alas, we return. So when you take a train from a station, you are often going to a new place and a new life, new experiences. The author I'm going to talk about is Joanna Rebelo Fernandez. She's a journalist, editor, author of 3 books. Originally from Goa, she lived in Bombay. Now she's based in Gurgaon. Her major interests are culture, built heritage, and urban history. And her first book is Treasure at the Train Station, illustrated by Rituparna Sarkar and Hitesh Sonar, two very talented artists. Now, this is the book on the left, which I'm going to talk about. The other 2 are later books by the author, but they are not concerned with railways. So, and a quote from this author: I would love for children to pay attention to railway stations too. More often, people breeze in and out of stations without really noticing them. But even the most unremarkable ones may have something exciting going on. So, this is what the author says about stations, that if you are a rail fan, don't only look at trains, look at railway stations also, and encourage children also to do that. So this is about one of the greatest stations of the world, which we know as Bombay VT, now called Mumbai CST. The story starts in 1967. There is a man called Neil Kamal. He arrives there. Now, Neil Kamal works for a jeweler, and his job is to carry jewels from place to place. So he has just collected a valuable emerald from a seller, and he's taking it to his employer. And he's hidden this emerald in his turban because he thinks that is a safe way of carrying it. Now, when he gets off the train, even in those days, Bombay VT was very crowded. He collides with another passenger, his turban falls off, and the gem gets lost. This is how the story begins. Then we have a different scene. We come to 2018. The same Neil Kamal, who's an old man now, he arrives at CST station, and he's got his 2 grandchildren with him, his twin grandchildren, Nirvan and Araya. He's getting off an EMU here, and you can see the 2 small children with him. Meantime, there is a parallel plot because, as you know, there are a lot of carvings of animals on the station walls at Mumbai CST station. So the parallel story is that these animals, they become alive at night, and then they interact with each other, they talk to each other, they run races, they compete, they talk. So this is a parallel story. And now the stories come together. Now, this is very interesting. The station is competing for a special award given to buildings around the world. And we all know that this is referring to the UNESCO heritage tag. But in this story, the drawings have been stolen. And the stone animals, they nab the thief with the help of pigeons who live in the station building. The pigeons are live pigeons, and these animals are, of course, stone animals. And in the process, the long lost emerald is also found. Now, how this happens, we'll have to read the book. It's too long a story for me to tell you. But it's very interesting how these different themes, these different strands come together, and as the story is completed. Some quotes from this book. Victoria Terminus, was there ever a grander station? In my opinion, the answer is no. The second quote, unafraid of heights, this white-robed figure was the Lady of Progress holding a flaming torch and a wheel. This is the statue mounted on top of the building, top of the dome. And then the day-to-day, yet another Mumbai local slid into platform 3, screeching shrilly. Now, anyone who's seen a local train entering a station will appreciate this description, screeching shrilly. And here's another quote from the book, which shows a typical scene, and there's a sketch also from the book. Then came the white-capped dabbawalas, a typical Mumbai scene, balancing wooden crates on their heads, stuffed with tiffins. Then there were wonderful fisherwomen with their cane baskets brimming with wet fish. Anyone who has been to Mumbai would have seen these sights, and you can easily associate it with Mumbai CST station. So why I like this book is there is detailed information on history, geography, and culture of Mumbai and its railways. And it is set at the legendary VT station, now called CSMT, India's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. This has authentic information about the construction of VT station. And interestingly, the characters, the grandfather and the children, are based on the author's own family members. The author encourages readers to become rail and heritage fans. And like the previous book, this book also is meant for half tickets, but it can be enjoyed by full tickets or even senior citizens. There are a lot of interactions between humans and animals at the station. So this is going beyond the interactions between strangers. Here you have interactions between humans and animals. But how it happens, you will have to read the book to find out. So we come to the conclusion. Today, I have talked about 5 authors and their books. I am sorry there was a bit of a problem with the connectivity. So there was an interruption. These books were published between 1871 and 2018. Out of the 5 authors, 3 are British, 1 is American, and 1 is Indian. 4 of these works feature steam locos, and the last one has EMUs. For some reason, writers of railway fiction always prefer steam locomotives. Even though these books are written nowadays, they are set in the past and they focus on steam locomotives rather than modern day diesel and electrics. And like in my previous presentations, this is a purely personal choice, and these choices are not sponsored by anyone, or there has not been any survey to decide which books to include in this. It's a purely personal and perhaps a whimsical choice. There were a lot of other books, some of them which I am aware of, which could have been included. Some of them are listed here. I'll not talk about them, but you might find some of our favorites here. And in case you think that I should have included one of these, or maybe some others which are not even on this list, you are welcome to make your own presentation and tell us about your own favorites. So thank you very much. I'll just make one request, that you please share these books, these railway fiction books, with your children or your grandchildren or your nephews and nieces or your friend children, whichever children you know in this half ticket age group, these formative years, please share railway fiction books with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atulya. Most absorbing talk. What I liked most about it is the way you sort of connect your personal experiences with the books and with your talk. Extremely well done.
Thank you, sir.
If there are any questions or comments from anyone, please go ahead. First, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes.
Maybe you can remove the screen, Atulya.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, I joined quite late because there, there was a network issue at my end. Am I audible?
Yes, if you're audible, please go ahead.
Okay, this is Siloni here. My question, I'm sorry because since I wasn't there during the first half, I do not know whether this was addressed earlier. I wonder if there have been, because I'm sure there have been railway stories, railway fiction, where which is also an amalgam of horror fiction, of horror elements and information about the railways. So has that been taken up, or is there any way I could find out more about it?
Yes, good question. Saloni, today I was talking about railway fiction, which is meant for children. So there are a lot of stories which have a supernatural element, railway fiction with supernatural elements, or you could call it ghost stories. But today's talk was about railway fiction meant for children. So it doesn't have any ghost stories. But yes, they are there for the adult railway fiction.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you, sir.
The number of comments saying thank you for this talk are so large that I don't really have the time to go through all of them. But I can read the last one by Sebel Bose. Says, very nice, absorbing talk, getting better with each presentation, hoping for more. This is from Sebel Bose.
No, I have a request. I'm Shamla Narayan here, V. Anand's sister.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Because of network problems, I missed the title of the last book that you had taken up. You know, the one by the Indian author.
Yes. It's called Treasure at the Train Station.
And
it's available on Amazon. It's called Treasure at the Train Station. It's available on Amazon, and it's not a very expensive book.
And has she written any more railway stories?
She's written 3 books. On only this one is about railways. The other two. The other 2 are not about railways. But she's written a few articles and blogs about railways. So that's what I know about the author.
So as a person who's been researching on Indian English writing, I was really impressed by your talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So knowledgeable and so meticulously, made out. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I find that on this talk today, we have got a large number of people who are perhaps not members of our society. If you would like to hear more talks, not only on books, but on any other aspect of the railways, I suggest you join our society as members.
No, but can non-railway people also
Anybody.
join?
In fact, about half our members are non-railwaymen.
Oh,
most railwaymen are not rail enthusiasts. For them, railway is a job, whereas rail enthusiasm is a hobby.
Yep.
I mean, there are only very few like Atulya Sinha for whom it's a hobby. For most of us,
do we become a member?
It is only a job.
How do we become a member?
Send me an email. The email address is, you can please note it down, railenthusiast2015@gmail.com. Rail, R-A-I-L, rail enthusiast, one word, 2015@gmail.com.
At Gmail. Okay, I'll do that.
Railenthusiast2015@gmail.com. See, we publish a quarterly magazine. We have monthly talks. We have an annual seminar. We organize trips to various rail sites, railers' rail establishments. So anyone is welcome to join.
Okay.
Anyone, any age, any gender.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And in fact, our most active members are all non-railwaymen. Atulya is only an exception that proves the rule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Really enjoyed the talk. Took me back to my childhood days, but learned so much, your perspective was different.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Anyway, thanks Atulya, and thanks to all the audience. I think we can end for the day today.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let me now